All right, so today's video is about Sweave, Knitr, Markdown. Everyone sort of refers to them all the same and all differently at the same time. The idea is that it's a package that's going to allow us to write a PDF document, like directly into R. And you can write your interpretation, but you can also write your codes and create your plots, and everything prints out into a single really nicely formatted PDF. The downside is that we will be using LaTeX to write ours, which has quite a steep learning curve. It's sort of like Word or Pages. It's an interface you use to write text, but it's really the best interface when you want to be writing formulas or any sort of mathy paper. So we'll start today by going to Canvas. I've created a template for you to use so that you don't have to start every file from scratch. I mean, it's basically from scratch, but there are some packages that you'll use that are pretty standard and you'll always want to have them at the top of your page. I think it's called a preamble. So let's go over to Canvas. This is our class. You go to Files. It'll be in with the R files because it runs inside the R program. And it's this one here. You don't need to click on it because it won't open inside the browser. You can just download it and be very careful here how it downloads. Mine has downloaded as an RNW file, and that's important. It needs to stay that way. Like my computer knows that this is for R. Some of you before, when you downloaded a similar file, your computer automatically added like a TXT to the end, and that's not going to be helpful. So if it did add another extension to change the file type, you need to locate that in your downloads folder and then rename the file. But when you rename it, you simply delete the last 4 characters. So you delete the TXT and the dot that's before them. You just want it to stay. So it says Sweave template.rnw, no other stuff at the end. It's also possible that your computer didn't do that. Mine didn't, but it's been known to happen. Now we have it downloaded. As per usual, we'll go back to our studio and we need to upload it here. So I guess I'll put it in my class folder because that's where everything is. Go find it. Again, it should be in your downloads folder. I don't really know how you're managing it. And then you import it. So now it's sitting over here somewhere. I have a couple because obviously I made this one, but I'm going to choose the one without a space because sometimes it complains about file names with spaces in them, so it may as well just have them with no space. So when you click on that, it should load here on the left. It should load in its own tab, and you'll see this type of tab is a Sweave file. It's the RNW file. If you didn't manage to change it from being a TXT file when it opens here, it's all black. You don't have any of this blue or green text, and it's simply not what you need. So if you did still not manage to take it out of its text format and into this one, at this point, you would just create a new document here with Sweave. It's fresh. You would go to the old one. You would do Control A to select everything, Control C to copy, come to your new one, Control A to select everything, and Control V to paste. I don't really need to be doing that because mine's working fine. But in the worst case scenario that it's still not working for you and you don't have the right type of file open, that is your solution. I do not want to save this one. All right, so the rundown, I need to turn off all of those things. So the rundown here is that there's all this stuff at the top, and really don't worry about it. Once you sort of have a template that you use all the time, you just use it all the time. You have this packages you know that you use and you don't really bother with it. But I've already put in the packages that I use all the time. So this is going to be an article. You can also do presentations and other types of things. But for this course, you'll just use articles. And then I'm saying that I want to use A4 paper, but by default, the margins are enormous, like really crazy large. So I set the margins smaller here so that it looks nice. These are some other packages you need in order to be using international characters, which for us is probably quite important. So you'll just leave it. This is already in your file. You don't need to worry about it. But when you're creating any new file, I would suggest just starting with this template and then saving as, like just save it as something else, and then you can work in here. You can add things to the bottom. So all of this stuff you don't need. Even skip this. Here's one that's really your choice. This is going to add page numbers to the bottom of the page because I like that. I like having page numbers. Some people aren't really jazzed about it. Some people don't want it quite like this. So if you don't want it, you just erase it. It's not a big deal. Here's where you'd put the title of your document. You can call it whatever you want. I think that I will just call this discrete distributions, because the practice that we're going to do is both about discrete distributions, which we've now learned about, but also how to do it inside Sweave. So it's a nice combo. And then author, that is me. You can put your own name. You can put more than one author. Like you can put a comma and it'll put all of them in there. So if you're working in a group, just make sure to put everyone's names there. And then here you have begin document. So that's quite important. Everything before this is a preamble. And starting here, it's going to actually create your documents. These are just to make the output look nice. You can just click these little arrows to collapse them so you don't have to look at them. But go ahead and keep them, just ignore them for now. The first thing that you'll typically want to do is this command. It's called make title, and it tells the program to create a title page. And the title page will have the title that you created up here and the author on it, and also the date. Then you'll typically also want to have a table of contents. Even if it's a short document, tables of contents are very nice. And now it says end document because this one's empty. This is just a template. So this is a document that does nothing. It creates a title and some words called table of contents, but you don't have any contents to put in there, so it's quite blank. But we can go ahead and check out how it works the first time. However, before you run this the first time, I need you to change some settings. So go to Global Options, then come down here to Sweave, and make sure that it's weaving the files using Knitr. You don't want it to be using Sweave, you want it to be using Knitr. Works better. You can use whichever PDF viewer you want. I typically just stick with the RStudio viewer because it works the best for me. Apply and OK. And that should be fine. So we can already try it out. Let's go ahead and save this as, I'll call it discrete distributions. All right. So now it has a new name. It'll save it over here, but it's still this type of like Knitr Sweave file. Just to check before I get started, I want to see if it runs. So I'll click compile and I cross my fingers that it creates a PDF. It is possible that the first time you run this, it has to go get a bunch of packages and install them, and it's a whole annoying mess. It can just take a long time. Clearly it works. You can see that it works here, but I've done this before and I no longer remember quite how it went the first time I installed it. I also use LaTeX, so I have it installed on my computer, which may help. I'm not exactly sure how the interaction works. Anyway, so here's my title page and the word contents, and then nothing because I haven't written anything. But let's get started writing things. So first things, you usually want to start on a new page. Like I don't want to be writing my document inside where the table of contents ends. So I will just use the new page command. It's going to jump to a new page. It's just a page break. Then I need a new section. So this is usually where you would have a heading. I know a lot of people don't use styles, but you really should. So where you might use styles in Google Documents or Microsoft Office, or presumably also Pages, this is where you use section. So this new section, the first example is going to be about counting. So section is just what it's called, and then inside here is what you want to call it. So when I run this, it's going to create a heading that says counting example. I only have one prepared, so I'm just doing example, not examples with an S, and that's it. So then I'll come down here, but I typically compile very, very often because if I've made an error, it's a lot easier to find if I haven't added too much stuff recently. So I'll compile it again and just see what happens. It's creating the viewer. Now I've got two pages, and my second page just has a heading on it. It looks really ridiculous, but it will grow. And now my contents have one single heading and it automatically tells me the page numbers. So you don't have to be manually formatting pretty much anything. So I'm going to copy this example that I got from over here. You are going to have to type it yourself. It is an example that we've done in class. I'm going to put a space here. It doesn't mean anything. The only way to add line breaks is to use these double bars. When you put spaces here, it's just for you to see it, to see how you like to look at it, to get your stuff separated. So anyway, this is a counting example. They're planning some trips from 13 countries. They want to choose 9, and we have to calculate it. So we've calculated this before. We know that this is just a combination. So I'm going to put these two things, which is going to skip a line break, and then I'll have solution. And I want to skip to the next line down again. And then I will say, this is a combination. So then there's a formula. And here I will actually enter the formula. That's why LaTeX is great. So we need to calculate. And here, now that I'm going to actually use math, like math formulas, I will put this $sign. And then the command for choose, I use the squiggly brackets, and it's 13, choose 9. At the end, don't forget to put your bar or your $sign. If you forget the $sign, you'll get all these errors down here that it doesn't know how to close something, or it's a lot of errors. Anytime you get an error when it won't compile, look for somewhere that you've forgotten to close your squiggly bracket, close a bracket, close quote marks, or close these $signs. It's typically that you've forgotten half of your pair. So let's compile this and see if it works. I was not kidding that I really compile it extremely often. Yeah, so you can see here, there's this line break. That's what we put in with those like double bars. So then it comes down here. Yeah, we need to calculate that, but we can actually calculate it. So we need to insert a chunk because we want R to actually be doing work here. Everything before was sort of word processing. It wasn't actually calculating things. I don't have anything in my environment. I haven't run anything in the console, but now I want to do some actual R work. So I click this to add a chunk of code, and it adds it like this. So there's these little carrots and then an @ symbol at the end. I think it's called an arroba. Anyway, so the command inside R is just choose 13, 9, because it's 13, choose 9. This is how I run it. To check that it works in R, it's the same way that I always do it. I'll press Control Enter just to run the code and see what happens. Yeah, I guess it's 7:15. I already know this because I've seen the answer. And now when I compile my PDF, it's going to run that code, and then you'll see both things. So I have my text, but then you can see this gray box. This is the code I entered into R, and this is the answer it gave me. So I know there are 715 different ways that these two people could choose countries to visit. But in the case that you didn't want this choose 13.9 there, you didn't want your code showing, that you choose up here between these brackets. So then you would write echo equals, and you would choose false. And when you choose false, it just doesn't show the code that you entered. It only shows the output. In particular, when you are creating tables and that sort of thing, what you really want is a table, or what you really want is a graphic. You don't want all of this extra text just showing what command you put in. Now, when we compile it, now it's just got the answer. So I need a combination. I want to calculate this. Ooh, there's a period missing. 7:15. So close this. Put my period on there. Save often, compile often. Nothing is worse than losing work you've already done. And the second worst thing is not being able to find where an error is because you've added tons and tons of text and it takes forever and it's very annoying. Okay, so that was it. That was my entire counting example. So now I'm on to a new section, and the next thing we talked about was hypergeometric. We got two examples here, so I put examples with an S. But part of the reason I've done this is to show you how to use lists inside this interface. So like you might want a numbered list or a list with letters or a bullet list, and you really have to add that all in. You can come up here to where it says format, and it does have a few options for you. Like you could choose numbered list, and this is the general format. You have to put begin enumerates and end enumerates. Again, if it doesn't compile, if something goes wrong, make sure that you have both your begin and your end and you don't have a typo. If there's any letter that's in the wrong place, anything's backwards, it just won't work. And then the item, every time I type this word item, it's creating a new number, like number 1, number 2, number 3. You don't number it yourself, it numbers it automatically. But I actually want some extra stuff on mine. I wanted to say example on it, and I want it to be on the left. So here, label equals example, and then numbers. So that means it's going to count like example 1, example 2, example 3, and it's going to put a period afterwards. If you wanted this round bracket to be after your number, you could do that as well. And then this left margin, here I'll actually leave it out so that we can see what happens. Lots of text. Lots of text. Okay, so let's see what happens when we compile this. So it's like weird and over here and too far left. That is why I put that left margin command. So I'm just going to undo what I did before, leave my dot, left margin, and now I'm actually going to write my first problem. So the first problem goes here, and the problem also comes from the class lecture. It's about songs in your playlist. So I have 11 songs in my playlist, 6 are country, 5 are pop, blah, blah, blah. So this is all going to be together in one paragraph, and then I use this double backslash or forward slash, I don't actually know which one that's called, but I use the double slash to get like a hard return to come down to the next line, because in the next line is where I'm going to start talking about my solution. So solution, well, from like one broad category, which are songs in my playlist, I'm choosing songs, but from 2 smaller categories. So we have here that we are choosing from 2 distinct categories without replacement. So it is the hypergeometric distribution. And I said that because I also typed it. I need you to be able to calculate these by hand. You're going to need to do them by hand, but also to do them in R. So by hand, you would calculate, and here we're going to practice how to type in a formula. So if you recall the hypergeometric formula, it's got like it has a fraction, and on the top are 2 different choose things, and on the bottom is another choose. But because I want an entire line all to itself of this math formula, when I did it before, I just stuck it right at the end. I had this like 13 choose 9 quickly at the end, but now I want it to be on its own line. So I do this slash, and I open my brackets, and then I close my brackets. And those are the I'm typing math in here brackets. So I want the probability that x equals, well, actually, I have to read it. What is the probability that you listen to exactly 2 country songs? Okay, so x is 2. Close my bracket, equals. If I want a fraction, I have to type in fraction. So, and I also always use cfrac because it makes your fraction a little bit bigger. So you can either type frac with these squiggly brackets, or you can choose to put a c in front, which just makes your fraction appear larger, like the font is bigger. Up here is where you put the numerator, and in the next one you put the denominator. So in the numerator, I have my first choice, which are 6 choose 2, because there's 6 country songs and I'm choosing 2 of them. So I have squiggly bracket, 6, choose 2. Then I have another one for my other songs, and it's going to be 5 that I'm choosing from, and I'm also picking 5, so there's 3 left. So then I have 5, choose 3. So that's in my numerator. If I try to run this right now, it won't work at all, because this is empty, and it will complain about my mismatched fraction. So in the bottom, I have 11, choose 5. And now, ooh, I forgot the slash. See how it's blue? If you're missing the blue, it's because it's not working as a command and it will all go wrong. So let's cross our fingers, see if I compile it, if it works. Yeah, so here I have it. So up here, before, it was in the same line as the rest of it. That's why I just used those dollar signs. But now it's on its own line, and that is with that slash square brackets. Also here with the items, you can see that it's like lined up on the left. But because it's a numbered list, the entire stuff is indented here. This says example 2 because I already wrote item. I didn't write anything after it, but there's this item here, which means it's counting stuff. I still need to add that in for myself, but that's a ways away. So I'll add some more space because of course I want to be able to write this down and I do want to be able to calculate it by hand. But right now what I really want is I just want R to calculate it for me. So I'll put in a chunk. It's your choice. Do you want it to show the code? Do you not want it not to show the code? If you do want it to show, you can leave it. If you don't, you'll have to type echo equals false. You could also type echo equals true, but the default is that it's true, so it'll just print your code anyway. I think I'm okay with it showing the code on this one, so I'm going to leave it. So hypergeometric distribution, if you want to get a PDF, that is that it is at exactly one value, then you'll use d hyper. It should appear here for you, and you can see here the stuff going on. I need to put in X, M, N, K. Who knows what those are? That's a lot of choices. So actually, I can come over to the helper and type hyper. And here I have it. And if you scroll down, I did put this in OneNote, but anyway, it tells you what things you need. So M is the number. Here they're using like a white ball, black ball example, and we have like country song, pop songs. But you can read this and get an idea of what it is that you need to put in your code. So I have hyper, X is 2, M was 6, N was 5. We chose 5 songs. By default, these things here, like this log is false, which is great. I just want to keep it that way. We don't need to be doing any log scales. And again, this is an R code. I want to run it in R. I want to check that it works before I print it into my PDF. So I do Control Enter just to run it and see if it works. I don't actually know the solution. I've forgotten already, but I assume that this is correct. If it's not, I'll come back and fix it in the PDF that I may give you, but I'm not fixing it in this video because they take forever. So now that I know my code is working, I can try to compile it again. Really, I know it's weird and sort of annoying, but the more often you compile, the less you'll be surprised when something goes wrong and you'll be able to find it and fix it quickly. So I chose to print out the code here, and here's my answer. That's all I needed for that one. But now let's consider a different example. Let's consider that we have a jar of buttons. So I come down here to item. I can kill this empty space. I could keep it. It doesn't make any difference. It's just how I prefer to read it. It becomes kind of overwhelming, all this text here. So if you can keep spaces between your paragraphs, it's easier for you to find things. So that needs a space. Okay. So again, it's the same sort of question, but now it says at least 3. This at least already means that I'll need a cumulative distribution function, not only a PDF. So I've already got my hard return in here. I'm just going to copy this part because the solution is still more or less true. Ooh, but I like this on a new line. So new line, new line. Okay, but this time it is a CDF. So it's the probability that X is at least 3. So greater than or equal to 3. This /GE is going to make that greater than or equal to symbol. But when you're calculating cumulative distributions, you need to be coming from the left. Like most of the programs that calculate them come from the left. So you don't need to have greater than. What I need is a less than. So this is actually equal to the probability that x is less than or equal to 2. This is a discrete distribution, so there's nothing in between 2 and 3. There's only 2 and then 3. So if it's greater than or equal to 3, then it's the opposite of less than or equal to 2. Which means I could add them up. I could say, okay, 1 minus this first one minus the second one. I am going to sort of cheat right here. So 3, 4, 5. Okay, so for R, this is how you would have to do it. And then we would have like 1 minus, and then you would have to have this fraction again. Now I will make mine a C frac. And this is really tedious to write in. So I am currently going to skip it. I will just put random numbers, just so that it works. Okay, let's check that it runs. So now I have example 2. Yeah, so here it's just got these like random numbers I put in. But what you really need to be doing is typing this whole thing, but you need to type it for p equals 0, p equals 1, and p equals 2, because those are the ones you're subtracting away. I realize now I could actually have considered instead adding p equals 3, p equals 4, p equals 5. Potato, potato. So I had already typed this, and I'm going to go ahead and just cheat and copy it. You, on the other hand, are going to have to type it one character at a time. But I don't know that you would ever really need to be typing these. So be careful when you paste in. See, I've got doubles of these, doubles of these. Here is where it opens, and here is where it closes. Let's compile it and see if it still works. Was I only choosing 4? Oh, of course, if you only choose 4 buttons, then it's just what happens when you choose 3 and what happens when you choose 4. But now I actually want R to be my workhorse here. I want it to do everything for me. So I have to insert a chunk because this is actual R code. This is still a hypergeometric, but now it is a cumulative rather than just a single value for the probability density function. So I'm going to choose this second one here, this like P. So P hyper. It's more or less the same stuff, but here I absolutely must choose that it's going from 0 to 2. So in the very front, I have to do 1 minus because we know that all probabilities add up to 1. And there are 4 black buttons, 4 brown buttons, and I choose, see, I choose 5 buttons. I still have to add another one on here. I run that in R and it says a half, which is true. I already checked this with the answer. So you could choose to like type in this one for 3 and then add it for 4. But typically you'll do this 1 minus because you know total probability adds to 1. So it's either one side or the other, but adding to 1. That's the whole thing that I have for this distribution. So I think you may as well compile it. Notice that it saves every time it compiles, which is convenient. So here, yeah, so here's the 3 of them are whatever color, and here's 4, but there are only 4 buttons, so you can't have more than that. Probability of a half. If I come back up here, I now have 2 things in my table of contents, and that is that for that one. Next, we're on to the binomial example. So I'll clean up the space to my end enumerate. I'm starting a new section, so of course I need a new section. I'm going to call it binomial examples. And And let's just consider we have a fair coin that's flipped 30 times. We know that coin flips are independent. Okay, so it's flipped 30 times, it's independent, and now we're asking a couple questions. I'm going to format this a little bit differently. Rather than having like two separate examples, this is going to be two questions about the same example. So I still need this begin enumerate thing. And don't forget that you always need to also end your enumerate. You'll usually want to type that before you do anything else. But this time, I've decided to make them A and B with lowercase. And I've decided to like label equals this lowercase alph with a star, and then it's a round bracket. But I still wanted to go to the left margin. I don't want this indenting away from the text. And you may want it, you may not. It really depends on the situation, but like I know I don't. So then I have item, and I type my first question. So let's first ask, what's the probability of getting exactly 10 heads? So nothing, not at least, not more than, not less than, but exactly 10. Let's compile this to see what it looks like, see that it works. I'm here, so here's how it's different. I would actually like that this was a little further left, but I am not going to look into it now to see what the extra code would be that I would have to scoot it over. Anytime you have questions about LaTeX, just go straight to Google and just type like no indent numbered list LaTeX, and there will inevitably be somebody who has had the same question, and there will also be somebody who will have answered it with really great examples. Okay, so this is here. Yep, ready to go. So I know this is binomial because there are two possible outcomes, and every single experiment faces the same possibilities. Those are the wrong. So solution. All right, so I know that this is a binomial distribution. I'm cheating here by copy pasting. So this is an example of a repeated independent experiment with two possible outcomes, which makes it a binomial distribution. And we're specifically asked to find the probability that x is 10. It's in line, but it's still like mathy text, so it goes in between these dollar signs, which is calculated as follows. Here, I've jumped to the next line down. I think for readability, I'm going to keep these always separate. So the probability that x is 10, you'll recall that with the binomial distribution, it's going to be n choose k or n choose r, depending on which book you're looking at. So 30 times it's flipped, 10 times it's heads. Ah, yes, we have not identified our distribution. 10 heads. So like x is my random variable, and it is the number of times that I get heads. So the probability of heads or tails is just 50-50. So heads 10 times, tails 20 times. This is a formula, like just to write down. It's not inside R, it's not calculatable. It's just text so that you're showing the reader that you know the formula, the equation to get this probability. So we are here. Yeah, looks great. But now we actually want to calculate it. So again, we insert a chunk of R code. No surprises, it's going to be very similar to this other one. It'll be D binomial X size probability. So it's 10, 30, 0.5. I check it with the control enter just to see what comes out. 0.027, sure. So that's going to print out when it calculates it for me. I can check by compiling. This is maybe a little bit extensive. Perhaps you don't have to compile it so often, but I'd like to discuss what it looks like. So it's here. This was my code, and it's spit out the results. Again, remember, if you don't want the code to show, you just put that the echo is false. And now I have a second question, which is almost the same, but I want to check what is the probability that I have at least 10 heads. So not exactly, but at least. This is a new question. So it's a new item. What is the probability of getting at least 10 heads? It says to state it mathematically. I think that's not necessary. Okay, so solution. Again, this is binomial, but now it's a CDF because we are talking about at least. We need to calculate the probability that x is greater than or equal to 10. Close bracket, close my math. Great. I've added several lines and I also pasted something in, so I will compile it to make sure there are no errors. That's fine. It's like I don't care what it says, but I just want to make sure that nothing is going terribly wrong. You can see here all the complaints that it has. So this is a CDF. If I wanted to calculate this, I would have to say like probability that it's 10, plus that it's 11, plus that it's 12, plus 13, plus 14, all the way to 30, or I can consider it the other way with the 1 minus. So the probability that x is greater than or equal to 10 is the same as 1 minus the probability that x is less than or equal to 9. There are fewer numbers between 0 and 9 as there are between 10 and 30, so this is probably the way to go if you were desperate and really had to calculate it by hand. And you would have to sum that up. So that's 1 minus what happens when you add up underscore I goes from 0 to 9 of this binomial distribution. So it's 30, choose I. This will make more sense once I finish. 0.5 to the power I, 0.5 to the power 30 minus I. Okay, so to run through this. Here, it's going to be a summation symbol. I hope you've seen them before. You should have seen them in your previous courses. And these are the numbers that are running. It's going to run from 0 to 9. So first it chooses 0, then it chooses 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And these exponents also run. And as you'll recall from the formula, this is always what you're choosing, and this is whatever's left. So I have 30 minus I. Let's see what this looks like in the PDF. It will look much less frightening when it's in its normal form. So it looks like this. Well, I hope it's less frightening. Oh no, that was a lot of zooming. Okay. So this represents this cumulative distribution. You remember you have to add up all of those bars. So it's the 0 bar plus the 1 bar plus the 2 bar. But then you're subtracting all of those from the total of 1. R will do it for you, and it will do it for you very quickly. Insert a chunk of code. This is a CDF, so we'll use this P in front, whereas before we used a D, binomial, Q. So this is the one, it must go to the left. So this has to be 9 to 30, 0.5. Lower tail, that's fine. Oh, I forgot my 1 minus. 1 minus. Well, and there you have it. There's your probability. I think it's no surprise if it's supposed to be 50-50 and you flip it 30 times, it would be really weird if you didn't get at least 10 heads. So that's it for the binomial distribution. I mean, of course you need to study these things, but this is just about how you would write it inside here. There are 2 more distributions, but I think I'm going to stop here. And then for the other codes, if you need more information on the codes, you can go to OneNote, which is here. So in the lecture notes from today, at the very bottom is the information about the R code. So here you can get, okay, this is the code that gives me the PDF, this is the code for the CDF, and here the idea of what goes in. So you'll always need to know these things. It often calls it Q, but Q and X are really the same. So it's just whatever value you have here. Okay, so that is everything for now. Hopefully you make it through this whole thing. That's not what I wanted. Nope. Yeah, so we have this. I think we just compiled it, but let's check one last time how it turns out. And this is how, it's the same way that I made any PDF that I've ever given you. So our table of contents is getting bigger and bigger. The more we write stuff, the date is today. Here's all our text. This is sort of at the bottom of the page. I could probably choose to put it on a new page, and I would just use that new page command. It's not really a big deal. Or I could not be so brief with my explanations, which is really probably what I want from you. All right, that covers everything. I hope you don't have any questions.